In the depths of space, aboard the last surviving human vessel, the Hope's Legacy, a young communications officer sat hunched over her console, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the transmission controls. The weight of humanity's future rested upon her shoulders, along with those of the remaining 5,000 survivors who had escaped Earth's destruction 6 months ago. The massive viewscreen before her showed nothing but endless stars, punctuated by the occasional flash of the alien warships that had been pursuing them relentlessly across the galaxy. These beings, who called themselves the Nexarians, had appeared without warning in Earth's orbit 2 years ago, demanding complete submission from humanity. The officer's dark eyes reflected the soft blue glow of her screen as she remembered that day. The Nexarians, with their crystalline ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, had initially appeared peaceful. They offered advanced technology and the promise of joining their galactic empire. But beneath their promises lay a darker truth: they wanted Earth's resources and viewed humans as nothing more than primitive beings to be subjugated. When Earth's leaders refused their terms, the Nexarians revealed their true nature. Their weapons were beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Major cities fell within hours. The officer still remembered watching the news feeds as Tokyo disappeared in a flash of purple light, followed by New York, London, and Beijing. The survivors had barely managed to escape in the experimental deep space vessels that were meant for humanity's first interstellar colonies. Now, after months of running, they had made a discovery that changed everything. Deep within the ship's quantum computers, a young scientist had found a pattern, a weakness in the Nexarians' seemingly impenetrable defense systems. Their empire, vast as it was, had a fatal flaw. Their interconnected network of planets and ships relied on a specific frequency of quantum entanglement to maintain their communications and power systems. The officer's team had spent weeks developing a virus that could exploit this weakness. If successful, it would cascade through their entire empire, causing a chain reaction that would disable their technology. The risk was enormous. If they failed, the Nexarians would surely destroy them all. But they had run out of options and places to hide. A soft chime from her console interrupted her thoughts. The virus was ready. Behind her, she could hear the whispered prayers and quiet sobs of the bridge crew. They all knew this was their last chance. The pursuing Nexarian ships were closing in, their weapons charging. In less than 10 minutes, they would be within range to fire. The officer took a deep breath, remembering her family back on Earth, the billions who had perished, and the few thousand survivors who now depended on her. Her hand stopped trembling as she opened a channel to broadcast on all frequencies. The message she would send was simple but carried humanity's defiance and determination in every word. As she prepared to transmit both the message and the virus, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The Nexarian vessels had increased speed and would be in weapons range sooner than expected. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady despite the circumstances: "All hands, brace for impact. Engineering, divert all power to shields." The officer's fingers flew across her console, making final adjustments to ensure maximum broadcast range. The faces of her crewmates reflected both fear and resolve in the emergency lighting that now bathed the bridge in crimson. This was the moment that would define not just their fate, but the legacy of all humanity. As the first energy blasts from the Nexarian ships began to rock the Hope's Legacy, the officer pressed the final command key. Across all frequencies, in every language Earth had ever known, and encoded in formats that any advanced civilization could understand, humanity's final message began to transmit: "We will destroy your empire." Along with these words went the virus, racing through subspace at speeds beyond imagination, seeking out the quantum frequencies that held the Nexarian empire together. The officer watched her displays light up as the transmission began spreading exponentially through the enemy's network. Whether they would succeed or fail, humanity would be remembered not as victims, but as warriors who fought back against impossible odds. The ship shuddered under another barrage of enemy fire. But for the first time in months, a smile crossed the officer's face. They had done it. The transmission couldn't be stopped now. Win or lose, humanity had made its stand. The real question was, what would happen next? The aftermath of humanity's defiant transmission unfolded like a cosmic dance of light and shadow. Within seconds of the virus's release, the pursuing Nexarian ships began to exhibit strange behavior. Their crystalline hulls, once seamlessly absorbing light, now pulsed with erratic patterns of energy that resembled lightning trapped in glass. The communications officer watched in awe as her monitoring systems tracked the virus's spread through the quantum network. It moved faster than anyone had anticipated, jumping from ship to ship, station to station, planet to planet. The Nexarian Empire had built their civilization on the premise that their quantum technology was impenetrable. This hubris would be their undoing. On the bridge of the Hope's Legacy, time seemed to slow down. The crew held their breath as the massive enemy vessels suddenly stopped their pursuit. The weapons' fire ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Through the viewscreen, they watched as the closest Nexarian ship's crystal exterior began to fragment, lines of fracture spreading across its surface like cracks in ice. The ship's young scientist who had discovered the weakness rushed onto the bridge, his tablet displaying streams of data. "It's working better than we could have imagined," he explained, his voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. "The virus isn't just disrupting their systems, it's forcing their quantum technology to decohere. They built everything on perfectly maintained quantum states. When those states collapse..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The crew watched as the nearest Nexarian vessel's crystalline structure began to dissolve, transforming from solid matter into a cloud of shimmering particles. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching a star being born in reverse. Deep within the Hope's Legacy, the quantum computers continued to monitor the virus's spread. Reports began flooding in from the ship's long-range sensors. The effect was cascading through the entire Nexarian network, jumping across their quantum channels faster than light itself. Their empire, built across thousands of star systems, had become their own perfect destruction mechanism. But victory didn't come without consequences. The dissolution of Nexarian technology released enormous amounts of energy into space. The Hope's Legacy rocked violently as waves of quantum displacement washed over them. Warning klaxons blared as the ship's systems struggled to compensate for the distortions in the fabric of spacetime itself. The ship's engineer, an older woman who had survived the fall of Earth's last fortress, worked frantically at her station. "The quantum backlash is creating gravitational anomalies," she shouted over the noise of straining metal. "We need to get out of here before space itself tears apart." The captain, who had remained steadfast through months of pursuit, made a decision that would once again test the limits of human ingenuity. "Plot a course through the debris field," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Use the gravitational distortions to boost our speed. We'll ride the quantum wake out of the blast radius." What followed was perhaps the most daring maneuver in human history. The Hope's Legacy, mankind's last vessel, threaded its way through the disintegrating remains of their enemy's fleet. The ship's hull groaned under the stress as they navigated between waves of quantum energy that could tear them apart at any moment. The communications officer, still at her post, continued to monitor the spread of their virus. The data painted an incredible picture. Across the galaxy, the mighty Nexarian Empire was quite literally falling apart. Their quantum network, which had taken them millennia to build, was unraveling in a matter of hours. But amidst the destruction, something unexpected began to emerge. As the virus spread, it exposed more than just the Nexarians' technological weakness. Hidden within the quantum noise, the officers' systems began picking up signals from other civilizations, survivors and resistors who had been suppressed by the Nexarian Empire for generations. These signals were weak at first, like whispers in a storm, but they grew stronger as more Nexarian systems collapsed. Messages of gratitude, offers of alliance, and warnings of danger still to come poured in from across the galaxy. Humanity, in its desperate bid for survival, had unknowingly sparked a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. The young scientist worked furiously to translate and categorize these new signals. "We're not alone," he announced, his eyes wide with wonder. "There are others out there, dozens, maybe hundreds of civilizations. The Nexarians kept them isolated from each other, prevented them from developing quantum technology. We just set them all free." The realization of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The crew of the Hope's Legacy had not just saved humanity, they had liberated an entire galaxy. But with this triumph came new responsibilities and challenges. The quantum wake they were riding was taking them into unknown space, toward civilizations they never knew existed. As the ship stabilized and the immediate danger passed, the communications officer received one final transmission from a dying Nexarian command center. Unlike their previous messages of superiority and disdain, this one carried a different tone, one of respect, and perhaps even fear. The translation was simple: "You were supposed to be primitive. What are you?" The captain ordered the message archived but left unanswered. Humanity's response had already been given in the most emphatic way possible. As the Hope's Legacy sailed into unknown space, its crew began the monumental task of establishing contact with their newly discovered allies. The galaxy was entering a new age, one shaped not by the rigid control of the Nexarians, but by the indomitable spirit of freedom that humanity had unleashed. The communications officer looked out at the stars, now seeing them not as places to hide, but as destinations to explore. The next chapter of human history was about to begin, and it would be written not in the ashes of defeat, but in the light of 1,000 liberated worlds. The first contact with alien civilizations wasn't anything like the old Earth movies had portrayed. As the Hope's Legacy drifted through the quantum wake of the collapsed Nexarian Empire, the communications officer found herself overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of signals flooding her systems. Each transmission carried the hopes, fears, and stories of species that had endured centuries of oppression under Nexarian rule. The first to reach out were the Luminarians, beings of pure energy who had been forced into containment fields for generations. Their messages came in pulses of light that the ship's computers took days to decode. When they finally succeeded, the crew was moved to tears by the simple beauty of their words: "The darkness ends. We see your light." The ship's scientist worked tirelessly with the communications team to develop a universal translation matrix. The challenge was immense. They weren't just dealing with different languages, but entirely different forms of consciousness. Some species communicated through gravitational waves, others through complex molecular exchanges. Each successful translation revealed new wonders and horrifying truths about life under the Nexarians. 3 weeks after their great victory, the Hope's Legacy received its first visitor. A ship of the Synaptics, a species of crystalline beings who had survived by mimicking Nexarian technology, approached with caution. Their vessel was organic, grown rather than built, and it pulsed with colors that seemed to defy the visible spectrum. The captain made a bold decision: to allow their representatives aboard. The crew gathered in the main hangar, hearts pounding as the Synaptic delegation emerged from their transport pod. They moved like flowing mercury, their crystalline forms shifting and reshaping with each step. The universal translator hummed as it processed their chemical-based language. "You have done what we thought impossible," the Synaptic leader communicated, their form rippling with patterns that the crew would later learn indicated deep respect. "For 10,000 years, we waited, adapted, survived. You, in your brief existence, found their weakness and acted without fear." The ship's engineer, who had lost her entire family in the fall of Earth, stepped forward. "We had nothing left to lose," she responded, her voice carrying both pride and sorrow. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who has already lost everything. The Synaptics shared their knowledge freely. They were the record keepers, preserving the history and culture of countless civilizations the Nexarians had tried to erase. Through their crystalline memory matrices, the crew learned the true scope of what they had accomplished. The Nexarian Empire had controlled not just their galaxy, but had tendrils reaching into neighboring galaxies as well. As more species made contact, a pattern emerged. The Nexarians had deliberately kept advanced civilizations isolated from each other, preventing any alliance that might challenge their rule. They had ceded primitive quantum technology to developing worlds, creating a dependency that made rebellion impossible. Earth had been their latest target, but humanity's stubborn resistance had disrupted their carefully laid plans. The communications officer found herself becoming the focal point of an interstellar council that formed in the wake of the Empire's collapse. Species that had never known of each other's existence were now working together to rebuild. The Hope's legacy became a neutral meeting ground, its halls filled with beings of every conceivable form and consciousness. But not all was peaceful in the post-Nexarian galaxy. Some worlds, long dependent on Nexarian technology, had fallen into chaos. Others, seeing an opportunity in the power vacuum, began to build their own small empires. The crew of the Hope's legacy soon realized that destroying an empire was far easier than building a lasting peace. The young scientist made a disturbing discovery while analyzing data from their new allies. The quantum virus hadn't destroyed all Nexarian technology, some had gone dormant, hidden in subspace pockets throughout the galaxy. More worrying were the readings suggesting that certain Nexarian outposts had disconnected from the main network before the virus hit. They were out there, watching, waiting. The ship's medical bay became a center for healing as representatives from different species shared their medical knowledge. The doctor, who had saved countless lives during their long flight from Earth, found herself learning healing techniques that defied human understanding. Some species could regenerate entire bodies from a single cell, others could transfer consciousness between hosts. Each discovery brought humanity closer to understanding their place in this vast cosmic community. 6 months after the fall of the Empire, the Hope's legacy received a message that changed everything. It came from a small probe drifting in deep space, its origin unknown. The message was encoded in ancient Earth binary, predating even the Nexarian invasion. When decoded, it contained only 3 words: "Others are coming." The communication officer brought this message to the interspecies council that had formed aboard the ship. The reaction was immediate and unified: whatever was coming, they would face it together. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or subjugation, but by breaking the chains that bound them all. The captain stood at the great observation window, watching ships of 1,000 different species working together to establish new trade routes and communication networks. Earth was gone, but humanity had found something perhaps even more precious: a future among the stars, and allies who understood the true cost of freedom. As the Hope's legacy prepared to lead an expedition into unknown space to investigate the mysterious message, the communications officer made one final broadcast. It was sent to every corner of their known universe, a message of unity that stood in stark contrast to their declaration of war against the Nexarians. This time, humanity's message was simple: we are not alone, and we never will be again. Deep in the uncharted regions of space, the Hope's legacy led a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Ships of every size and configuration, crewed by beings of countless species, followed in formation. The mysterious warning had united them in purpose, transforming former victims of the Nexarian Empire into explorers and warriors. The communications officer had developed a new form of quantum entanglement communication, born from the ashes of Nexarian technology but infused with innovations from a dozen different species. The Luminarians had contributed their mastery of light-based data transmission, while the Synaptics provided crystalline matrices that could store vast amounts of information in a single molecular structure. But it was the discovery in the ship's cargo hold that had changed everything. Hidden among the refugees' belongings, they found an ancient Earth artifact, a simple wooden box containing what appeared to be a crude mechanical device. Carbon dating revealed it was over 10,000 years old, predating known human civilization. The ship's scientist nearly dropped it when initial scans showed it was generating quantum signatures identical to those in the mysterious probe's warning message. The device, which they called the predecessor key, seemed to react to the presence of certain crew members. In the hands of the communications officer, its internal mechanisms would spin and click, projecting holographic star charts that showed paths through space that shouldn't exist. The synaptics confirmed what many had begun to suspect: humanity's role in the galaxy was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Your ancestors were not primitive, the synaptic elder explained, their crystalline form shimmering with patterns of revelation. They were the guardians, the ones who seeded the defense against what lies beyond. The Nexarians didn't find Earth by accident, they were searching for you. As the fleet ventured deeper into unknown space, they began finding more evidence of this ancient human civilization. Abandoned outposts floating in the void contained technology that responded only to human DNA. The ship's engineer worked with teams of alien scientists to unlock these facilities, each one revealing new pieces of humanity's forgotten legacy. The doctor made a groundbreaking discovery while treating a group of rescued prisoners from a dormant Nexarian facility. Their genetic analysis revealed trace markers of ancient human DNA spliced into various species across the galaxy. It wasn't just technology that the Guardians had left behind, they had embedded a genetic key within humanity itself, preserved through countless generations. But with each discovery came new dangers. The dormant Nexarian outposts were beginning to reactivate, powered by something deeper and more sinister than their original quantum network. The fleet found entire solar systems where space itself had been twisted into impossible configurations, defending something at their centers that defied the laws of physics. The young scientist worked around the clock, correlating data from the predecessor key with astronomical observations. A pattern emerged: the protected systems formed a massive barrier, like a wall of distorted spacetime stretching across the galaxy. Whatever the ancient humans had been guarding against, they had gone to extraordinary lengths to contain it. The communications officer found herself experiencing strange dreams, filled with symbols that matched those appearing on the activated Guardian outposts. The ship's doctor discovered her brainwave patterns had begun synchronizing with the quantum frequencies emanating from the predecessor key. She wasn't just receiving signals, she was becoming part of an ancient communication network. The breakthrough came during a confrontation with a reactivated Nexarian dreadnought. As the massive vessel emerged from a quantum pocket, its crystalline weapons charged with impossible energy, the communications officer felt something awaken within her genetic memory. Her hands moved across her console with inherited knowledge, inputting commands in a language she had never learned. The predecessor key responded, its mechanism spinning faster than ever before. Through the ship's quantum-enhanced sensors, they witnessed something extraordinary. The space around the Nexarian dreadnought began to fold, revealing layers of reality that had been hidden for millennia. The truth behind the Nexarian Empire became clear: they weren't conquerors seeking power, they were running from something. The captain gathered the fleet's leaders in the Hope's Legacy's newly constructed council chamber. Representatives from hundreds of species listened as the communications officer shared her genetic memories. The Guardians had built their defensive network for a reason: to contain a breach between dimensions, a tear in reality caused by beings that existed beyond the comprehension of any single species. The Nexarians had discovered this truth and sought to prepare the galaxy through forced technological evolution. Their empire wasn't built on mere conquest, it was a desperate attempt to create a unified defense against what they knew would eventually break through. Their methods were cruel, but their fear was justified. As if to confirm these revelations, long-range sensors detected massive distortions approaching from beyond the galactic barrier. The ancient warning became clear: the others weren't coming from across space, but from outside reality itself. What the Guardians had contained, what the Nexarians had feared, was finally arriving. The communications officer stood at her post, watching the fleet sensors track the approaching anomalies. The predecessor key hummed in harmony with the quantum drives of 1,000 allied ships. Humanity had not only found its place among the stars, they had rediscovered their ancient purpose. The next battle would not be for survival or freedom, but for the very fabric of reality itself. As the fleet prepared for what was to come, the Hope's legacy broadcast one final message to all ships. It wasn't a declaration of war or a call for unity. Instead, it was a reminder of what they had discovered about themselves. "We are not the last hope," the message read, "we are the first line of defense. The Guardians have returned." The first breach appeared like a wound in the fabric of space itself, a rippling tear that seemed to absorb both light and darkness. The United Fleet, led by the Hope's legacy, watched as their sensors struggled to comprehend what lay beyond. The communications officer's hands trembled not from fear, but from the surge of ancient knowledge flowing through her genetic memory. The predecessor key had transformed the ship's quantum core into something beyond its original design. Crystalline growths, guided by synaptic technology and infused with luminarian energy, spread throughout the vessel's systems. The ship was evolving, becoming a hybrid of all the species' technologies, guided by forgotten Guardian protocols embedded in human DNA. The young scientist made a startling discovery while analyzing the breach. "It's not just one tear in reality," he announced to the gathered fleet commanders. "The readings show thousands of microfractures spreading across our dimension. The others aren't invading, they're trying to merge their reality with ours." The ship's doctor had been working with a coalition of alien healers, studying the changes in the crew's genetic structure. Those with the strongest Guardian bloodlines were experiencing accelerated evolution. Some could now perceive quantum states directly, while others developed abilities to manipulate spacetime on a local level. Humanity's dormant potential was awakening in response to the imminent threat. The first entity to emerge from the breach defied description. It existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between states of matter and energy. The fleet's weapons passed harmlessly through it, their energy absorbed into the seemingly endless layers of its existence. But when the communications officer activated the predecessor key, something remarkable happened. The ancient device projected a field of pure quantum information, a language written in the mathematics of reality itself. The entity responded, its multidimensional form condensing into something almost comprehensible. Through the quantum network linking the fleet, all species witnessed the first true communication with a being from beyond. The walls between worlds grow thin, the entity transmitted directly into their consciousness. "Your ancestors understood the price of separation. The Guardians chose isolation to preserve your evolution, but the universe cannot remain divided forever. We are the reconcilers, and we bring unity." The ship's engineer, working with teams of alien technicians, had discovered that the Guardian outposts weren't just defensive installations, they were parts of a vast mechanism designed to maintain the separation between realities. The Nexarians had understood this partially, but their fear had led them to try controlling rather than understanding the system. Deep within the Hope's legacy, the predecessor key revealed its true purpose. It wasn't just a key, it was a seed, a template for transforming matter and energy into bridges between dimensions. The ancient Guardians hadn't been fighting against invasion, they had been preparing for a controlled convergence of realities. The communications officer's genetic memories unlocked further revelations. Humanity's scattered civilization hadn't been destroyed, it had been deliberately dispersed across the galaxy, carrying fragments of the knowledge needed for this moment. Every human bloodline contained pieces of a vast biological code, a living key to understanding and managing dimensional barriers. As more breaches appeared, the fleet faced a decision that would affect not just their galaxy, but all of existence. The reconcilers offered a vision of unity that transcended physical laws, but such merger carried the risk of destroying everything unique about their reality. The choice between preservation and transformation fell to those who carried the Guardian legacy. The ship's scientists discovered that the quantum virus that had disabled the Nexarian Empire had inadvertently begun a process the Guardians had designed millennia ago. The collapse of their quantum network had created ripples in spacetime that were actually necessary for a controlled convergence of realities. What had seemed like victory in war had been preparation for something far more profound. A new discovery shook the fleet. The Nexarians themselves were failed attempts at creating beings capable of existing in multiple realities. Their crystalline technology and bodies had been experiments in dimensional adaptation, but they had lost sight of their purpose, turning to conquest when understanding eluded them. The communications officer, now serving as a bridge between past and present, between one reality and another, gathered the fleet's leaders for a crucial decision. The predecessor key had shown them three possible paths: resist the convergence and risk the violent collapse of dimensional barriers, accept immediate unification and lose their individual existence, or attempt a controlled convergence guided by the awakened guardian knowledge. Through the quantum network, species across the galaxy participated in the discussion. The Luminarians offered their understanding of energy states that bridged dimensions. The Synaptics provided their expertise in preserving consciousness across different forms of existence. Each species contributed insights that completed pieces of the Guardian's ancient plan. As the breaches continued to expand, the Hope's legacy initiated a transformation that would reshape the nature of existence itself. The predecessor key, combined with technology and wisdom from 1,000 species, began broadcasting a signal that resonated with both their reality and the space beyond the breaches. The communications officer, her consciousness expanded by fully awakened guardian memories, understood at last the true meaning of humanity's journey. They had never been meant to simply fight or survive, they were catalysts for the next stage of universal evolution. The Guardians hadn't built walls to separate realities forever, but to ensure that when the walls finally came down, life in all its forms would be ready for transcendence. The fleet began the most ambitious coordination in the history of any reality. Ships of every species moved into precise formations, creating a vast network of quantum resonance. The Hope's legacy, now more than just a ship, became the focal point of an effort to guide the convergence of realities on their own terms. As the process began, the communications officer broadcast one final message to all species: in all realities, we are not ending our existence, we are expanding it. The Guardians did not prepare us for war, but for evolution. Today, we become more than we are, while remaining everything we have always been. The boundaries between dimensions began to shift, not with the violent chaos the reconcilers would have caused, but with the careful precision of 1,000 civilizations working in harmony. The age of separation was ending, and the true purpose of every species in the galaxy was about to be revealed. The transformation began like a sunrise across reality itself. As the Hope's legacy channeled power through the predecessor key, waves of quantum resonance rippled through both space and consciousness. The communications officer, her mind now existing partially in multiple dimensions, witnessed the most extraordinary moment in the history of all existence. The first changes were subtle but profound. The fleet's quantum network deepened beyond mere communication, becoming a shared consciousness that preserved individual identity while allowing for unprecedented unity. Through this expanded awareness, each species contributed their unique perspective to the convergence process. The Luminarians' understanding of light and energy merged with the Synaptics' mastery of crystalline consciousness, creating new forms of existence that bridged the gap between matter and thought. Deep within the ship's transformed core, the young scientist made a discovery that changed their understanding of life itself. The Guardian genetic code wasn't just a key to dimensional barriers, it was a template for consciousness that could exist across multiple realities simultaneously. Human DNA contained the instructions for evolving beyond physical form while maintaining the essence of what made them human. The ship's doctor, working with a coalition of xenobiologists, observed the changes spreading through every living being in the fleet. Cellular structures were becoming quantum entangled across dimensions, allowing consciousness to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Yet somehow, guided by the ancient Guardian protocols, they retained their fundamental nature. A human remained human, a luminarian remained luminarian, even as they became something more. Through the expanded quantum network, they discovered that Earth hadn't been destroyed by the Nexarians, it had been shifted slightly out of phase with normal spacetime, preserved as a seed for humanity's eventual return. The planet existed in a quantum superposition, waiting for the moment when human consciousness evolved enough to perceive and restore it. The communications officer, now able to process information across multiple dimensional layers, understood why the Guardians had chosen humanity for this role. Unlike other species that excelled in specific areas, humans possessed a unique adaptability, an ability to embrace change while maintaining their core identity. This resilience made them perfect anchors for the dimensional convergence. The reconcilers, observing through the growing breaches between realities, recognized that this controlled convergence was achieving what their forced unity could not. Instead of destroying the unique aspects of each reality, the Guardian method was creating bridges of understanding, allowing different forms of existence to interact without losing their essential nature. The ship's engineer, her consciousness expanded by the transformation, worked with multidimensional mathematics that would have been incomprehensible hours before. The Hope's legacy was becoming a nexus point, a living example of how different realities could coexist and enhance each other without merging into homogeneity. As the convergence continued, ancient Guardian outposts across the galaxy activated, revealing their true purpose. They weren't defensive installations but transformation engines, designed to guide and stabilize the evolution of consciousness across dimensional barriers. The Nexarians had misunderstood them as weapons, but they were actually tools of transcendence. The predecessor key, now fully integrated with the ship's systems, began projecting patterns of pure information into the space between realities. These patterns told the story of every species, every civilization, every moment of joy and struggle that had led to this point. It was more than a record, it was a declaration of the worth and beauty of each unique form of existence. Through the quantum network, they discovered that other galaxies were experiencing similar transformations. The Guardian seed had been planted not just in humanity but in countless species across the universe. Each had developed in their own way, carrying pieces of the knowledge needed for this moment of universal transcendence. The communications officer received a transmission unlike any before, a message from a version of humanity that had evolved along a different path in another reality. Through the growing connections between dimensions, they shared knowledge and experiences, each version of humanity contributing its unique perspective to the greater understanding. The reconcilers, witnessing this controlled convergence, began to change as well. Their desire for unity evolved into an appreciation for the harmony of diverse existence. Through the quantum network, they shared their own story. They were the first species to discover dimensional travel, but their rushed embrace of unity had cost them their individual nature. In humanity and its allies, they saw a better path. As the transformation reached a crucial point, the Hope's legacy initiated the final phase of the Guardian Protocol. The ship's quantum core, enhanced by technologies from 1,000 species and guided by ancient wisdom, began generating a new type of space, one that could support multiple forms of reality simultaneously. The crew watched in awe as their consciousness expanded to perceive this new existence. They could see the quantum strings that connected all things, the layers of reality that had always existed but had been beyond their perception. Yet they remained themselves, their individual stories and experiences becoming part of a greater narrative without being lost within it. Earth began to phase back into normal spacetime, its quantum state resolving as humanity evolved to reclaim it. But it wasn't just Earth returning, countless worlds that had been hidden or lost were emerging, each preserving unique aspects of life and consciousness that would enrich the new multidimensional existence. The communications officer, looking through layers of reality that now seemed as clear as glass, understood that this wasn't an ending but a beginning. Humanity hadn't just saved itself or even the galaxy, they had helped guide all of existence toward a new form of being where diversity and unity could coexist in perfect balance. The Hope's legacy, now a living symbol of this transformation, broadcast a message that resonated through all dimensions, all realities, all forms of consciousness. we are the bridge between what was and what can be. In our differences, we find strength. In our unity, we preserve uniqueness. The Guardians planted the seed, but together, we have grown into something greater than any single reality could contain. The age of separation was over, but the age of discovery was just beginning. As the transformed fleet prepared to explore this new multidimensional existence, they carried with them the most important lesson from their journey: true transcendence comes not from becoming something else, but from becoming more fully what you already are.